Research Talk. I hope you all are doing well and ready for another exciting video on qualitative research. In our previous videos, we covered research philosophy used in qualitative research. We talked about different research designs used in qualitative research. We talked about data collection, sampling process, different kinds of data that is collected in qualitative research. Now, we are going to start with data analysis in qualitative research. So from today onwards, in this video and in subsequent videos, we will cover different ways of coding the data, different ways of analyzing the qualitative data. So let's begin. So first thing, before we start talking about data analysis, I want you all to remember certain things, keep certain things in your mind. And what are those things? Number one, data analysis is not the same process as you see in quantitative research. So in quantitative research, what happens? You start with collecting the data, you finish collecting the data, and then you do the analysis. You put the data in your software, SPSS or R or whatever statistical software you use, and then you analyze the data. So data analysis and data collection are two separate processes. However, in qualitative research, they are not separate. In fact, data collection and data analysis, they are cyclical in nature. What it means? So what you do as a qualitative researcher, you collect some data, you analyze the data, and then you collect further data, then you again analyze the data, then again collect some data. So it's a cyclical process. And why do we do that? Because being an exploratory research approach, you start your project with knowing some of the information, some of the things that you might expect with certain design and all those things, but there are certain things that you don't know. So let's say, for instance, you develop an interview protocol, a semi-structured interview protocol. You have your questions lined up, what questions you want to ask, and you are ready with that. And then let's say you did your first interview. And then in the first interview, participants shared something which you did not think about. And that question is not there in your interview protocol. So what you do, you update your interview protocol based on what you came to know in the first interview. So that's what I means that qualitative research is a work where you keep yourself updating based on what emerges out of the data. And that's why I say, so you collect some data, you do your initial analysis, and then based on the analysis, you collect further more data and again do analysis. So your data collection informs obviously your data analysis, and your data analysis informs your data collection. So it's a cyclical process that goes together. They are not very separate processes that we see in quantitative research. And before we start the data analysis process, there are other things that we need to do as qualitative researchers. The first thing is you need to organize and clean the data. What I mean here, cleaning the data. So let's say I did my interviews, and these days, because of AI, and there are so many tools that people use to transcribe their interviews. So, however, these softwares are not 100% perfect. So let's say if I'm using a software package to transcribe my interviews, it might have, based on the interview quality, based on the clarity of voice and all those factors, I might achieve, let's say, 95% accuracy in that machine-generated transcript, but still I need to check it. So what I mean is, once you have your initial transcript, you look for accuracy meaning that the transcripts are accurate. So you get your first draft from the software that does it for you, and then you make sure everything looks good. In terms of organization, another thing I recommend is print if you are doing it in paper and pencil coding. So organization means like if this is a page, A4 size page, so you put your transcript on this side and your code on this side. So what you do, you leave some margins on the right side to write your code. So these are your interview transcript, and then you keep some space margin on the right side so that you could write your code. If somebody enjoy doing it on the left side, so you can do reverse it. So you can have margins on the left side and your transcript, interview transcript on the right side so that you could do the coding. So that's another thing on about organization and cleaning the data. Further, another important thing to do before you actually start the data analysis is de-identify the transcript, what it means. So as part of the ethics of the research, what we do, once you have your transcription ready, you go and change the identifying details of the research participant's name or other details which can, let anybody guess who this person is. You want to change all those informations, and that process we call it de-identifying the information in the data. So make sure you de-identify. Once you get your transcript ready, you organize it the way I shared here, and then what you do, you remove the identifying details from your transcripts before you start your data analysis. Another thing I suggest before you start data analysis is familiarize yourself with the data. What it means is familiarizing is obviously when you are conducting interviews, you are present there, you are listening all these informations. So you are so you are being exposed to the data. Let's say you did not conduct the interview yourself. Let's say the interview is conducted by your assistant or other team members. So in that case, you don't know. You are not there in the interview. What you have is interview transcript and that you are planning to code. I recommend before you do that is listen to the audio file, listen to those interviews. And that will help you to familiarize yourself with the data. So that's what I highly recommend to do that before you actually start your data analysis. Another thing to keep in mind is when you are start coding the transcripts, do not code the researcher comments or researcher questions, because the interview transcript is going to look like researcher, oh, tell me about your journey of becoming a teacher, and then the response of the research participant. Then you ask another question, okay, tell me about what was the first time when you realized that teaching is the profession that is meaningful for you. So you see the questions being asked by the researcher is there in the transcript. So when you are coding, you don't code those questions because that's not the focus of the study. The focus of any study, qualitative study, is to understand, analyze the participant's experience, not my experience. So do not code researcher questions in the transcript. So that's briefly about some of the things I want you to keep in mind before you start data analysis. Now let's move to, you already have heard I'm using a word coding the data, coding the data. So let's talk briefly about what I mean, because code as a word is used in different contexts, in different ways. Let's say if I'm a software engineer, and I say, oh, I changed the codes, it means something different. It's related to the program, software program. When I say I coded the data, and I'm a researcher, the word code has a different meaning. So let's understand what is the meaning of word code and what it entails actually. What is the process of coding entails? So let's talk briefly about that. So the word code in the context of qualitative research is basically a word or a short phrase, either a word or a short phrase that a researcher use to denote, capture the meanings or focus of the data. So of a datum, a portion of data, not the whole data, a portion of data. So let's say what it means is I'm reading the interview transcript, let's say 1 or 2 or 3 sentences, and then I'm writing a code for these 3 sentences. And what this code is, this code denotes or try to capture the meaning, or maybe the essence of what is being shared here, or a kind of, I would say, interpretation of that 2, 3 sentences that I am trying to code. So basically a code is a word, it could be a word, it could be a short phrase that try to capture the meaning, the focus, the interpretation of what I'm reading and what meaning I'm deriving out of that. So that's what a code is. And here I said a portion of data, or a word I generally people use, datum. Datum is a singular of data. So when I say a portion of data, a unit of data that I'm reading, and then I'm using a code to denote my interpretation, my meaning that I'm deriving from that portion of the data. Now, what is the purpose of doing this whole exercise? Like why I'm coding? So coding is basically a tool actually. It's a strategy, a tool that we as qualitative researchers use to analyze the qualitative data. And the purpose is why we use this coding as a tool is to understand patterns, processes in the data. So that's purpose one. When I'm coding all these interviews data or any observation data or any other kind of data, what I'm doing is, the purpose of doing this coding is to understand, decipher patterns, processes underlying those conversation or those data. Another purpose of why we do coding and why coding is effective is it helps us to categorize or link different portion of the data and see the relationship, or categorize the data in different categories. So that's another purpose of why we use codes as a process of data analysis. Further, it also helps us to understand underlying meaning. What I mean when I say underlying meanings, underlying meanings means that when you are reading, when you are looking at the data, you will understand what is going on here, but you may not get a deeper understanding of what is happening here. So when you code the data, that helps you, this whole process of coding helps you to understand and see the underlying processes, the underlying meanings which is there. Further, coding also helps us to build a theory, understand a framework, build a framework or processes underlying a social phenomenon. So these are some of the reasons why coding is important, and how coding helps us to understand and analyze the data. So that's briefly about qualitative research coding process. And so we talked about, let me just summarize it briefly. So coding is a cyclical process in qualitative research, data collection, data analysis. We do it simultaneously. And basically coding, or a word code, means that as a researcher, you are assigning a word, a short phrase that denotes the meaning, that denotes the essence, that denotes the focus, that denotes the interpretation of what is there in that portion of the data that I am analyzing. Now I want to show you a live demonstration of how it looks like. So let me use my computer to show you how coding as a process looks like. So this is my computer screen, and as I said previously, I wanted to demonstrate how coding looks like. So this is a Word document you could see, and as I suggested previously, I have created some margins on the right side, and on the left side you could see some excerpt from an interview. So basically, if you look at here, the research topic is experiences of remote work during the COVID-19 pandemic. And here are some excerpts you could see, 1, 2, 3. And so I wanted to demonstrate how coding looks like. So let's begin. So the first excerpt you see, the participant is sharing that I found it hard to separate work from home life. My living room became my office and I ended up working longer hours than usual. So how can I code it? Let me add a box here, text, like a text box, so that I could put my codes here. So if I want to code this particular excerpt, I can start with, so based on what is in here, I'm going to code it as blurred work-life boundary. So that's what comes to my mind in terms of capturing the meaning, what this person wants to communicate, by reading this excerpt. That's what comes to mind. So he's talking about how it is hard to separate work from home life, and how living room became his office and ended up working longer hours. So I can code this excerpt as blurred work-life boundary. Now let's look at another excerpt from the same study. Having regular video calls helped maintain a sense of team cohesion, even though we were all working from different locations. So what I can code here is digital team building. So that really what is being talked here, how they are try to maintain team feeling of being in a team through video calls, and try to be in touch through technology. So digital team building is what I can put a code here. Now let's do the third excerpt here. I started taking short walks during what used to be my commute time, which really helped me mentally transition into the work, transition into and out of work mode. So let me think about what we could code this excerpt. I can code it like adapted routine for well-being. Adapted routine for well-being. So you see what is happening here when so coding is basically you are reading an excerpt, a couple of sentences, sometimes even one sentence, and you are using a phrase, a word that captures what is being shared, or what is here. So you are trying to interpret and use a group of words to denote that. So that's what coding looks like in general. Let's take another example with another study. So you see, this study is student motivation in online learning environment, and we got some excerpt here too. So let's start coding this one too. Let me first add a text box here. Sorry. Oops. Can remove it from here and frame it here. Let's put it here. Okay. So the first excerpt, you see, I feel more engaged in classes that have interactive elements like polls and group discussions. It makes me feel I am part of a learning community. So I can code it like engagement through interactivity. What do you think about this code? Now let's read the other excerpt from the same participant. The lack of direct feedback in online courses makes it hard to know if I'm on the right track with my studies. So I can code it as need for feedback. Sorry, feedback. Let's read the next one. I appreciate courses that allow for flexible deadlines. It helps me to manage my time better around work and family commitments. So I can code this excerpt as flexibility and time management. So that's how. So you see, like I'm coding the day. I'm coding this excerpt. What I see, what I hear, how I interpret what is being shared by the research participant. Let's take another one. So this research topic is dietary habits among college students. And let's code this excerpt. Okay. So the participant is sharing here, I mostly eat fast food during the week because do not, I don't have time to cook. I don't know, I know it's not the healthiest option, but it's quick and fits my budget. So what code we can use here? We can write convenience eating. Okay. Now let's code the other excerpt from the same study. I try to meal prep on Sundays so that I have healthier options throughout the week, but sometimes I just end up ordering pizza because I'm too tired. So I can code this excerpt as intention versus practice. So this person has intentions of preparing the meal on Sunday, but in actual practice, he ends up ordering pizza because he is too tired. Let's look at the third excerpt here. I find that sharing meals with my roommates not only saves money but also makes eating a more social and enjoyable experience. So I can quote this one as social eating habits. So you see, this is how coding process looks like. The purpose of doing this demonstration is to help you understand how actual coding looks like when you are actually doing it. And I'm sure you must have, when I was doing this coding, what codes came to my mind, I wrote it here, but I'm sure you also, when you are reading this excerpt, you may have maybe a bit different code for the same excerpt that I'm coding here. And that's natural. That's very, very natural. That's what happens. If we coding is a very subjective, not very, but to a certain extent, it's a subjective process. So if you think, oh my God, my codes, I was thinking about a different code, that's normal. The codes of two different researchers for the same transcripts is not going to be exactly same, and that's okay because coding is an interpretive process. It's a process where the researcher is interpreting what the data is. So in the process of interpretation, it's natural to see some differences. So it's fine. Coding is not an exact science, right? It's not an exact science. So subjectivity is included. So that's not a problem if you think about a different set of words for the same excerpt that I coded here. We will talk more about this coding process in our coming videos, but I hope in today's video you learned what is a code, what is coding in qualitative research, what are some ways, what are some things you should keep in mind when you start coding, and how a coding process looks like. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again